Author is funded by the Pacific Northwest Writers Association, supporting writers from pen to publication since 1955. To learn more about the PNWA and their yearly conference, please go to pnwa.org. All right. So, Amy, you know, it's interesting. He said that you published your first short story when you were 34. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, probably. I don't remember
Thereabouts.
what age. It was 34, 35, something.
But you were
like
about
that.
33 when you said to yourself, I'm interested in writing. I'd like to pursue creative writing, which I've interviewed lots and lots of writers, and the average age for a writer knowing they want to write is actually 9. That's
9.
Yeah. But
Oh.
but at 9 you were interested in art, weren't you?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So my first question to you is this. Where was the writer between 9 and 33? What was she doing? Where was she?
The writer was always there. I just didn't know to say I wanted to be a writer. You know, saying that you're a writer means that you're setting out to be a published author. And that didn't seem possible. It was, you know, like, you know, being an African American saying you wanted to be president. And at a certain point, you know, you think about those possibilities that are within reach. And an artist was something. I had a great uncle who was an artist, and so I thought that was a real possibility. But I was writing letters to my friends, and I would make up the stories. We moved every year, and there was only so much I could say after I live on this street, and the name of my school is this, and after that, I just made it up. I gave myself a new name. I was writing fiction. And I also wrote an essay called What the Library Means to Me, and I took first place and won a transistor radio and was published in the Santa Rosa Press Democrat.
It was.
It was published, yeah.
So
I was a writer, but I just never would have called myself one.
Wouldn't call yourself one.
Because, you know, I was writing, everybody writes.
Right, anyone can do it, right?
Yeah.
Sure, but not anyone can draw, not everyone can sing. But we were back in the green room and you were telling some very entertaining stories about your life with fish. And were you telling stories as we just were, or was it always on the page?
I don't think I would have been telling stories to people. I think it was on the page. I did write fictional stories to myself and to friends. I don't know, I have a childhood friend here. Did I ever tell stories when I was little? Lies. I have an old friend here who, her parents and my parents were in the original Joy Luck Club. And so she and I grew up together from the time we were really, really little.
Wow.
So, and she was the one who also said that I used to draw really well and that it was natural that I would want to become an artist. And, but I don't know if I told stories to people.
You know, how did your family feel about it? Because that's often a big obstacle for some writers, in that the idea of the artist's life is perilous and fraught with threats of poverty. And not all parents look forward to that for their children. Do you think that would have been a problem for them if you had said at 21 or 15, Mom, Dad, I know what I want to do?
That I wanted to be a writer or an artist.
Would they have flipped out?
They would have thought that was fine, you know, be an artist or a writer as long as you also became a brain surgeon. You could do all those things. You could be also a concert pianist. You know, there was no limit. But the primary thing was you had to become a brain surgeon first and foremost.
Brain surgeon?
Because the brain was the most important part of the body, according to them. Yeah.
Do you think the brain is the most important part of the body?
I think there are many parts of the body that you cannot do without, and the brain is one of them.
Okay. Okay. So, all right, so there you are, and you're 33, and that's when you decided to, and when you said at 33 you got interested in writing, do you mean you started right away thinking, I want to write a story that I can publish, or just I would like to commit to having this creative outlet in my life on a regular basis?
Well, at that age, I was already a published writer. I was working as a business writer.
Okay.
And I had a lot of clients. I was writing topics like telecommunications and you, or, client management, or, things that had no interest to me. A lot of things having to do with telecommunications. My clients were those related to the breakup of the Bell operating system, the AT&T. Now AT&T, it's all come back together again, glued back together again. But back then, it broke up, and I had all these clients.
Yeah.
And so I had tons of work. I was working 90 billable hours a week.
What?
Yeah, and I was getting 4 hours of sleep, and I said, my clients loved me, and I couldn't stop working, but it didn't mean anything to me. I mean, telecommunications and you. It was not anything I ever aspired to, but, I was successful in a way. And at one point, somebody said, you have a problem because you can't stop working. You're a workaholic. And I said, no, I'm not. I don't like what I do. And they said, that's why you're a workaholic. So I went to see a psychiatrist for the first time in my life, and it was really a big decision because it meant something was wrong with you.
Right.
In my mind, and it meant you had to pay somebody, to listen to you talk about what was wrong with you. So I went, and the guy, he was great. He was really helpful because he fell asleep 3 times. And I decided that nothing was wrong with me, and that what I needed to do was find something more important, and that I would either take improvisational jazz piano, or fiction writing. I loved fiction because I was an English major. I read all the time. And as a child, I thought one of the most ideal job you could have would be a librarian, because all you'd have to do is sit in a library all day and read. So I knew that I loved to do that. I had not really tried to write fiction, but I liked the solitude of writing.
Yeah.
And I tried to write with the idea that I did not need to make money. I had an ability to make money through this business writing. And so that was not a pressing need. I would learn the craft, and I wanted to be serious about it.
What does that mean to you, serious about it?
There were a number of things that I would start in my life. I think I'd be serious in shooting pool, and that I'd get to be a pool shark level. Right. And then I'd sort of lose interest in that, or I would, think of other hobbies, and then I'd lose interest. I have that tendency. And so when I started this, I said, no, don't do what you've done in the past, where you just get very passionate about something and then lose speed. And I went to a writer's workshop, and I found that I had written a terrible story. But when the person I consulted with told me what was wrong with it, instead of being disheartened, I got very excited, because was exactly what I wanted to hear. The question of what a story is and what voice is, and that these were things I could continue to explore for a very long time without any pressure of needing to find an answer and make money. So I vowed that I would take it seriously by having a goal, and that was to be published by the time I was in a good literary magazine by the time I was 70. I still have some time left. But, I thought it was important to have a goal, but giving myself that permission to simply do it.
I think it's critical because time and again, in my own experience and all the writers I've talked to, that when you go to the desk to do your work, the worst thing you can do is let your attention go out to the people that don't exist, really, the readers or the theoretical editors and so on.
Yeah.
You have to keep your attention on that thing you're trying to do.
Yeah. I've had people ask me questions I find very odd. One woman said, I'm thinking of starting to write fiction, and do did you hire the publicist before you started writing, or does that come later? And I just looked at her like, oh, no, you should see if you really want to write. And I felt like saying, I don't think you do. I think you want to do publicity.
Yeah, there is a difference between wanting to be a writer and actually wanting to write.
Yeah.
Which you discovered you want to do. It's one thing to say, I want to get serious about it, because it sounds like you have, I'm a little bit this way myself, which is as a young man, I realized I'm good at getting good at things. That's great, but what do you want to be good at? And it sounds like you're kind of the same way.
You can be good at many things.
Yeah.
You can develop a skill set and be good at many things. But here's what the difference was. It was finding something that was the meaning of my life.
Yeah.
And we don't always get to choose a career that is going to sustain you in life financially, be stable, and also be the meaning of your life. I had a really good situation, but when you looked at the subject matter, I just knew that was not my meaning. So I wanted to do that, and I knew that I could do the other part. I just have to set aside time to find the meaning. People can find meaning in their lives having kids, or many different things that they do in life, or it could be in their work. I needed to find that still.
Yeah, and the beautiful thing about writing, of course, is that you don't find the meaning like you find your purse. Oh, there it is. I've got, you kind of go back in and in and in each time, right?
It was the writing of it that was the meaning. Looking at it and delving into what the story was, and then I could see it. It'd be this glint of the meaning. And it was working something through in the story and realizing this whole aspect of writing and thinking and feeling deeply was the meaning. Yeah. And that's why I had to keep doing it. Couldn't do it, full time, because I still needed to make a living and pay my bills. And actually, my husband would have supported me. He believed in that anything I put my mind to, I would succeed in. But I always had this feeling I had to be self-sufficient. My mother had taught me that. You have to be able to carry your own. So even though he was willing to do that, no, I had to earn my own living. Yeah. And the reason is I had to feel completely independent. If I ever wanted to leave him, I could. Or I needed to know that the reason why I stayed with him had nothing to do with money.
Yeah.
And that's good. That was good knowledge for me.
Yeah.
We're still together.
I know, 40 years now? Is that
44 years.
Wow.
We met on a blind date at Linfield College in McMinnville, Oregon. We were both from the Bay Area, but we happened to meet in McMinnville, Oregon. Yeah.
So eventually you publish Joy Luck Club, and I can't think of you without thinking of this experience I had with the Joy Luck Club. And I'll try and tell the story very quickly, but it's never happened to me before. It's never happened again. And I was at a point in my life where I wasn't reading. I just stopped reading. So I saw this book at the top of the bestseller list. I'm like, what the heck's it doing there? I wonder what it's doing there. Because I didn't know, because I wasn't going to read anybody. And so I go to see the movie when it comes out. And I see it here in Seattle, one of these places where it goes sort of after it's done its main run.
Yeah.
And it's the middle of a Saturday afternoon. The place is pretty full. It was pretty full. And I'm one of 3 guys, I think, maybe it's gone to. Okay, so we're watching the movie. It's great. I'm liking it. And then there's like this crescendo of action, and it gets quiet, and I hear this sound. I'm like, what's that sound? And then the noise, the volume comes back, and it gets quiet. And now I'm hearing that same sound here and there, and up. And now the sound, every time it gets quiet, I hear it spreading and spreading. And then towards the end of the movie, it's filling and it's weeping. Oh. The whole audience, but it's quiet, and then the lights come up. It was bizarre. The lights come up, and it was like the darkness was like a damper, and the whole audience, it was like a catharsis. And I've never seen it before. I've never seen it since. And I said, I know why that's on the top of that list. Now I do. So my question to you is this. There's you, there's Amy, and then there's the book or the movie, and then there's that experience that those mostly women had that you probably will never meet. What connection is there between you? Is there a line between you and that you're somehow aware of?
That reaction really took me by surprise, in part because what I was writing seemed so particular to my family, to my mother, and that if anything, people would say, well, that's a pretty bizarre family, and, we've never, we don't believe that. And to find that people were identifying with it emotionally was surprising to me.
Yeah.
The movie, by time the movie was out, we pretty much knew what the reaction would be. In fact,
Right.
we're rather, not cynical, but rather manipulative about it, I think. I was a co-screenwriter and a co-producer.
Yeah.
And, there was Wayne Wang, the director and co-producer, and Ron Bass, the co-screenwriter. He's a real screenwriter. And Ron and I would be writing scenes and, back and forth. At one point, when we had it almost done, we'd go through and count where people would cry. Yeah, they're going to cry there. Oh, they're really going to cry here. Oh, they'll cry here. And then we'd go to the screenings and see if that was true.
Was it?
And it was,
Oh, boy.
and that's kind of terrible. It was manipulative in a way. We wrote it with our hearts, but then we went back and we looked at it. Because these were the places where we cried.
Right.
And so we knew that that's what was going to happen. When we went to the premiere in Hollywood, and there were the big stars there and everything who came out to support it, my mother was there. And I was a little afraid of what was going to happen because there were scenes in that movie that were based on what had happened to her as a little girl, watching her mother die and, telling her mother not to leave. And she was sitting there in the audience, people were crying, and I was sitting next to my mother, and I'm kind of looking at her, and she's looking. And the lights come up, end of the movie, everybody's crying, and I look at her, and she's clear-eyed. And my mother was very emotional. She'd cry at the drop of it. If you said no to her, she'd start crying. But there she was, clear-eyed, and I said, are you okay? I mean, was that too sad or too hard? She goes, oh, no, everything in China, so much worse. This is already better. And I thought, okay. She just watched her mother die on the screen, and she says...
But did she not even recognize it as her life?
No, she recognized it completely, but she was fascinated to see it. It was like, it was Daisy Tan on the screen, and she loved it. She absolutely loved it, yeah. She wanted to star in the next movie,
But I mean, what about that? It must have been like having the roof pulled off to go from...
It was frightening, yeah.
I mean, suddenly,
No.
kapow!
It was frightening. This was going to be one of these little books, first-time writer. I'd written 3 short stories, one of which was published, and then the book was bought, and I was supposed to complete this. It was supposed to be a collection of short stories, not a novel. It went out as a collection. We started getting blurbs, and people called it a novel, so they struck out the word stories on the title page, and it went out like that. There was a small print run, and it was small enough that now if anybody has a first printing, it's worth, a fair amount of money.
Yeah.
It means they didn't expect this book to do very well, and you got this book at that period of low expectations. But there were things that were building so that by the date of the publication, which was March 22nd, things were going a little crazy. And that day, I cried. And it was not with joy, it was out of fear. And I thought, what is happening? Because I never asked for this. I never looked for an agent. I never was going to submit this. I never submitted this story to the magazine that first published it. It was a friend of mine who submitted it for me.
Wow.
Didn't tell me. And then suddenly I had this call and said, we want to publish this story. Never submitted it to a magazine in Italy. They just took it without permission. Another magazine, 17. And I didn't have an agent then, and then the agent saw the story in 17 and said, do you have an agent? So that it all was happening in this very odd way without pursuing it. I told my husband at one point, I said, there's something really strange happening. Every time I forget to write, you know, if a week goes by, something like this happens where they call up, we'd like to publish this story, you know. What?
Wow.
And so I'd keep doing it. So by time the publication date came around and things were building, I was scared because I was happy in my life. I had a, you know, I liked my marriage, I had a house, I, you know, liked my friends, I liked where I was in life. I liked writing and I could do that, but this was out of control. And it continued to spiral out of control. And I would tell my husband, this is going to die down any minute, and I don't trust this. And, you know, it's going to be on the shelves for 6 weeks, and then it'll be gone. And it didn't. It just kept building and building and building. And by October, that's when I finally said to him, I think I'm going to be able to write fiction the rest of my life.
Wow.
There'd been auctions for the paperback, and some foreign rights had been sold. So I accepted that, but I still was very wary. You know, I think I'm still, and I have this attitude that you cannot take anything for granted when it comes to writing. You could have enormous talent and never get published. Yeah. You cannot demand to be published unless you're doing on-demand publishing or ebook, somehow doing that yourself. But you cannot guarantee that, you know, I could sell this book now, but next year, maybe nobody wants to read a book that I wrote about turtles. These things are not guaranteed. So my philosophy from the beginning, when this was happening, is to always know why I write, that meaning of writing, and to never count on this. It is a form of luck, and you cannot count on it.
But you can count on the experience that you have in the writing itself.
That no one can take away from me. The meaning of it. I could write something that meant something to me. It does not mean it's the best written story around there. And if somebody were to tear me down about it, and reviewers or nobody, but you know, that would be painful. Right. But I would still have my meaning. It would not be the kind of, I've heard writers say, I wasted my life writing this screenplay and it never sold. And I think it's a terrible thing to do to yourself, expecting the meaning of your life is going to be deferred payment in the way of publication and public accolade. So I never counted on that.